Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to walk you through some of the most striking, consequential military developments around October 16, 2025, what's happening, what's being claimed, and what the bigger picture might look like. In recent days, one of the most remarkable shifts has been the U.S. military's growing posture near Venezuela and in the Caribbean. What was once framed primarily as counter-narcotics operations is now taking on shades of strategic pressure, deterrence posture, and even covert readiness. U.S. Special Operations helicopters MH-6 Little Birds and MH-60 Black Hawks have been observed operating over open waters less than 90 miles off Venezuela's coast, near Trinidad's northeast. The imagery suggests the involvement of the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, a unit long associated with high-end clandestine and direct action missions. Meanwhile, the naval fleet in the region has swelled destroyers, amphibious ships, cruisers, and covert support vessels such as the MV Ocean Trader are reported to be part of the buildup. At the same time, U.S. forces have carried out multiple strikes against vessels purportedly engaged in narcotics, trafficking, or linked to criminal organizations, with claims of 27 individuals killed so far. Some of the strikes appear to have survivors, complicating the narrative about these being purely kinetic shots across the bow. The Trump administration, invoking its authority and the so-called armed conflict designation against criminal groups, frames these as legitimate actions. Skeptics and international lawyers, however, argue that many of the operations lack transparency and may run up against international law limits. Simultaneously, in Europe, a major new strategic ambition is crystallizing. The European Union, in coordination with NATO, is moving toward creation of a defense space shield, a space-based protection and resilience architecture intended to defend European military and communication satellites from hostile interference or attack, particularly from Russia and China. This defense umbrella points to a growing recognition that future war domains won't be limited to Earth's surface or sky's outer space, is fast becoming a contested domain. Back in the U.S. context, tensions are flaring between the Trump administration and California's governor over a planned Marine Corps live-fire exercise at Camp Pendleton, intended to celebrate the Corps' 250th anniversary. Governor Newsom criticized the event as a vanity parade, warning it might require closing Interstate 5 for missile demonstrations. The Marine Corps later clarified that no public highways would be shut down, but the dispute underscores how military shows of force can become domestic political flashpoints. Also worth noting, the U.S. Army plans to relocate the headquarters of two major commands, Army North and Army South, from San Antonio to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, merging them possibly under a Western Hemisphere command structure. The shift is part of a broader organizational and strategic reorientation under Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Locally, this will affect jobs and infrastructure, but strategically, it signals a consolidation of U.S. power projection posture toward the Americas. Across the Atlantic and Mediterranean theater, Saudi Arabia is reportedly in talks with the U.S. for a new defense pact, possibly echoing the recent agreement between the U.S. and Qatar. This would represent a deepening security and intelligence alignment in a region already under immense strategic pressure, especially amid ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. Meanwhile, President Trump has announced plans to meet with Russia's Vladimir Putin in Budapest, with Ukraine high on the agenda. Indeed, the two leaders reportedly held a substantive 2-5-hour call on October 16, agreeing to convene high-level advisors next week to set the agenda. Closer to home for many viewers, Pakistan and Afghanistan remain in a precarious standoff. Escalating clashes have been reported along the Durand Line and in border provinces, including airstrikes within Afghan territory by Pakistan's Air Force. Retaliatory attacks by militant groups continue along border regions, exacerbating insecurity. While this doesn't dominate global headlines right now, the dynamic remains deeply consequential for regional stability. Let me pull back for a moment and highlight the connective threads. First, these various developments suggest a broadening of the definition of military engagement from counter-narcotics to deterrence, from regional show of force to strategic signaling in multiple theaters. In the Caribbean, the U.S. is not merely chasing drugs. It's subtly testing responses, supply lines, and escape routes. In Europe, the move to defend satellites signals that future conflicts will demand space resilience, and that states see value in shaping battlefields beyond Earth. In the Middle East, alliances are shifting, and diplomacy may follow hot zones. And closer to South Asia, fragile borders continue to be flashpoints with limited international attention. Second, legitimacy and legal constraints are under strain. The U.S. strikes on vessels off Venezuela have provoked questions about due process, state sovereignty, use of force in international waters, and whether criminal groups qualify as unlawful combatants. The administration maintains the armed conflict framing to justify operations, but that doesn't extinguish debates about transparency, proportionality, and civilian risk. In the domestic sphere, the confrontation over the Marine exercise shows how military spectacle can collide with political optics, even within Allied territory. Third, timing and signaling matter. The summit between Trump and Putin appears intended to reset some balance around Ukraine. That Russia-U.S. axis, which looms large in the strategic imagination of Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, could shift alliances or at least stakes in proxy conflicts. Meanwhile, the U.S. command restructuring in the Americas hints that the Western Hemisphere is being cast as a zone of interest, one in which persistent presence and readiness are expected to deter surprises. The European Space Shield Plan foreshadows future contests in a domain where advantage is costly and technology-driven. Fourth, risk is back on the table. Operating close to Venezuelan airspace carries dangers: mobile air defense systems, shoulder-fired missiles, maritime hazards, rules of engagement ambiguity. Analysts point out that while sea operations may be less vulnerable to long-range systems, entering sovereign airspace brings elevated danger, especially for helicopters with powerful heat signatures. The prospect of accidental escalation or miscalculation is real, especially when domestic politics and diplomatic tensions heighten pressure on field commanders. Finally, the spotlight is on transparency, accountability, and public legitimacy. If governments are conducting covert or semi-covert actions under broad mandates, citizens and international communities will demand more information. If satellite assets are threatened, states will expect collective defense protocols. If regional alliances are redrawn, strategic consequences will ripple. The tension between secrecy and strategic necessity is never fully resolvable, but the stakes are rapidly rising. So what should viewers keep an eye on in the coming days and weeks? First, footage or signals of further U.S. movements in the Caribbean, submarine transits, overflight patterns, partnerships with regional navies. Second, diplomatic statements from Venezuela, CARICOM states, or international bodies such as the OAS or UN, protesting or mediating. Third, progress or leaks in the Trump-Putin summit preparations, especially regarding Ukraine or arms control. Fourth, developments in European space defense, such as contracts, satellite hardening, or countermeasure programs. Fifth, political fallout in the U.S. around domestic military spectacle, budget debates, and accountability for overseas operations. And lastly, escalation or de-escalation along South Asia's border zones, because regional dynamics could shift at short notice. Wrapping it up, October 16, 2025 marks a moment when multiple strands of military strategy are visibly tightening. The U.S. is reshaping its posture in the Western Hemisphere, not just to chase illicit actors, but to assert influence in contested spaces. Europe is preparing for the coming contested domain of space. Middle Eastern alliances are being hashed anew, and South Asian borders remain fragile. The common thread is that war and deterrence are now multi-dimensional: sea, air, space, diplomacy, and covert domains. It's a complex chessboard, and the moves we're seeing now may define the contours of conflict for years to come. If you found this helpful, let me know. I can also break it down by region, deeper legal analysis, or scenario forecast.